Greetings, moviegoers. I'm the host. Well, the summer has finally come to an end, and it's time for me to look back on all the movies I saw in the theater with my official 2012 summer movie recap. Let's not waste any more time. Cue the montage. Let's start off with Marvel's The Avengers. After years of hype and build-up, Marvel Studios delivered big time by bringing together the world's greatest superheroes in one film together for the very first time. All I gotta say is DC better step it up quick if they ever want to do a Justice League movie. And just when things were starting off really good, in comes a disappointment such as Tim Burton's rendition of the popular soap opera, Dark Shadows. The art direction and lead performance by Johnny Depp are the things I like the most about this picture, but the rest fall apart due to a poorly developed script and a very inconsistent tone. Oh well, here's hoping Tim Burton gets back on track with this October's Frankenweenie. Sacha Baron Cohen returns with yet another tasteless comedy in The Dictator, about a foreigner visiting the United States, causing havoc and making senseless remarks against innocent bystanders. I think this gimmick has run its course for most audiences, but I still had fun watching this one despite the fact. Next up, Battleship, aka Hollywood has officially run out of ideas. Seriously, who thought this movie would work? Making a movie based on a board game is one thing, but throwing in an alien subplot is beyond idiotic. Special effects are cool, but so what? The movie still sucks. Now, after a decade-long hiatus, we finally get the long-awaited sequel in the sci-fi comedy franchise, Men in Black 3. Even though it's nowhere on par with the first film, I still thought it was a decent enough flick to warrant a matinee admission. Snow White and the Huntsman is a movie that gets everything absolutely right for a new age interpretation of a classic fairy tale. All except for one major detail: casting Kristen Stewart as Snow White. This was probably one of the worst casting decisions in movie history, and the project nearly falls apart because of her. I mean, how does she even get the part anyway? Oh, right. Awkward. Let's move on with yet another polarizing film, which is Prometheus. After seeing it twice, I could definitely see why some would call it an extremely flawed film. It brings up a lot of interesting questions but ends with no definitive answers. Some of the characters' motivations don't exactly add up, and why on earth would anyone continue to run in the shadow of a falling spacecraft? But despite the film's problems, I still enjoyed the majority of the film, as I am a big fan of the original Alien, and seeing Ridley Scott return to the film's universe really was a treat to see this summer. Now it's time for some indie fare with two completely original films, Moonrise Kingdom and Safety Not Guaranteed. These two couldn't be more different from another, with one film talking about an adolescent love affair while the other talking about time travel. But they both feature some of the best writing, acting, and original storytelling I've seen all year. And they also happen to be two of the funniest romantic comedies that I've seen in decades. Watching both Moonrise Kingdom and Safety Not Guaranteed was such a fantastic movie-going experience that I wanted to step out of my seat and give both of these films a great big hug. Which brings me to give them both my highest rating of a 10 out of 10. Yeah, just talking about those two movies makes me feel all warm and cuddly and at peace with the world. I hope the next movie is as good as those two. There's no question about this being the absolute worst movie to come out this summer, but rest assured, it's nowhere near as god-awful as Adam Sandler's last poor excuse of comedic cinema, but it's still pretty bad. Now here's something I wasn't expecting to like at all, and that was Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted. I guess the third time was the charm for this particular series, as it manages to be both visually creative and humorously enjoyable at the same time. If this ends up being the final Madagascar film, the makers at DreamWorks sure went out on a high note. And here's another really fun movie that I enjoyed pretty much that everyone ignored, which was Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. I really don't understand the backlash this film received. It's the 16th president of the United States killing vampires. Of course it's stupid. That's what makes it awesome. If you want to see a serious portrayal of Honest Abe, you're gonna have to wait till November for that film to arrive. Well, it looks like Pixar finally got back on track with their 13th animated feature film, Brave. This film may not rank up with the likes of the studio's other masterworks like Ratatouille, WALL-E, and Up. I still found it to be a very enjoyable family film that would play even better with mothers and daughters. In fact, this would have been the perfect movie to release on Mother's Day weekend, wouldn't it? I mean, what was the film they released instead? That's a good thing I avoided that train wreck. Seeking a Friend for the End of the World is yet another independent film that went below the radar, but I can understand why. The title states what the movie's about, and yet it tries to throw in a romantic subplot into the mix to even out the drama and comedy. In my opinion, I thought it all worked. The chemistry between Steve Carell and Keira Knightley I thought was genuinely special, and the story worked as a road trip with an apocalyptic backdrop. The more I think about this film, the more I love it, and that's enough for me to give it a 9 out of 10. Next up, Magic Mike, a film that shows that women are just as sex-crazed as the men whenever it comes to strip clubs. Channing Tatum stars as the title character that strips his way to achieve a better lifestyle for himself. But the one who steals the spotlight the most in this film is Matthew McConaughey, who's starting to make as big a comeback this year as Channing Tatum, but we'll talk more about him later on. Sure, the movie has its own share of problems, like a very slow pace and a very weak performance by Cody Horn, but despite its setbacks, Magic Mike was still a very entertaining surprise at the movies. For a while, I considered myself done with the TV show Family Guy, as I felt it started to get too repetitive and full of itself. So I had fairly low expectations for Seth MacFarlane's feature film debut, Ted. And that's probably a good thing because I thought this movie was hysterical almost from start to finish. Sure, it plays out like an extended Family Guy episode, but every time that blasted teddy bear came on screen, the comedy kept on coming, and I couldn't stop laughing. The Amazing Spider-Man was yet another film I had low expectations for this summer. Even though the film itself didn't turn out to be great, I was happy enough to know that it didn't suck as badly as Spider-Man 3. I thought it was a well-acted and well-directed film despite being an origin story we've pretty much already seen. Here's hoping the next film will be absolutely mind-blowing. Or better yet, make Spider-Man join the Avengers already. Now that I will pay money to see. Savages had potential to be a great film, but fell just a level short. But don't get me wrong, I still like this movie a lot. But given all the talent that went into this project, it definitely leaves more to be desired for the viewer. So far, this summer has some pretty good titles under its belt. But now it's time to move on to what many have claimed to be as the most anticipated movie of not just the summer, but the entire year. And that would be Christopher Nolan's epic Batman finale, The Dark Knight Rises. By the time most film trilogies get to the third act, that's when things take a turn for the worst, case in point, Spider-Man 3. But with The Dark Knight Rises, we get not only an epic spectacle, but also a brilliant conclusion to the Batman legend. Of course it gets a solid 10 out of 10 from me. Man, a lot of movie franchises are ending all of a sudden. Now that this incarnation of Batman is over, what else is there to look forward to? No. Oh, thank God. Now with our next movie, you might as well skip, which is The Watch. I could barely remember a thing about this movie, which could have been really good given the fact that it's an R-rated comedy and revolves around an alien invasion. But the majority of the jokes fall flat, the characters are complete morons, and the story is bland and forgettable. If you want to see a really good R-rated comedy featuring aliens, go see Attack the Block. Trust me, it's way better. Remakes tend to bug me a lot, especially when they take a movie that's already awesome to begin with and take a colossal dump all over it. Thankfully, that's not the case with the brand new Total Recall. On its own, it's a decent sci-fi action adventure with some good performances and really cool eye-popping visuals. But if I were to pick one over the other, the original still prevails. After getting a lot of critical acclaim from Magic Mike, Matthew McConaughey has been having a pretty good year so far. But if there's any chance at all that he would get an Academy Award nomination, it should be for his chilling performance in Killer Joe. His role as a hitman hired to kill a drug dealer's mother is quite possibly one of the most disturbing and unsettling on-screen portrayals of pure villainy I've seen in years. The minute he shows up, you don't even think about Dazed and Confused for even a second. It also earns its NC-17 rating due to a shockingly bizarre climax that everyone's going to be talking about for years to come. It's violent, creepy, twisted throughout, and I loved every single demented minute of it. Hope Springs was a nice little movie with some pretty great performances to go around, like Meryl Streep, who I would personally watch in anything she's in. Okay, maybe not everything, but still, she's pretty good in this. But I have to give major props to Tommy Lee Jones as her extremely shy husband who's taken out of his comfort zone whenever someone brings up their sex life. It's a really interesting look on long-lasting marriage that will definitely resonate with a lot of moviegoers, even when it starts to get a little too real and uncomfortable. Overall, I'd say it's still worth checking out. The Bourne Legacy is a film you could add on the list for this summer's biggest letdowns. What I thought was going to be a worthy follow-up turned out to be a movie about a guy traveling around the world to find super-enhanced steroids for 2 hours. That's probably the easiest storyline you'll get out of this overall needlessly complicated and flat-out boring spy thriller. Where's Matt Damon when you need him? The political comedy, The Campaign, is nowhere near the likes of this year's other comedic gems such as Ted, 21 Jump Street, or even Killer Joe, but it's still a solid comedy on its own with some really hilarious performances from its two leads, Will Ferrell and Zach Galifianakis.
Hate to break it to you, friend, but your balloon's getting ready to pop. And that balloon's full of your own butt toots.
You trying to trash talk me? Your mama's like a vacuum cleaner. She sucks, she blows, and gets laid in a closet. That's what nuts feel like.
Paranorman is the second stop-motion animated feature film from the same company that brought us Coraline, and it's a real treat. While it does feature frightening imagery that might scare away some of the younger demographic, Paranorman is still an original, funny, and genuinely moving film that deserves to be seen by anyone who's ever been in love with old-fashioned animation. I'd definitely keep an eye out for this one during Oscar season. A sequel to The Expendables was inevitable, despite what many had thought about the original. Luckily, this movie brings a lot more to the table than its predecessor in terms of how the action is presented and whom they managed to contribute to the fun, like Bruce Willis, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and the Texas Ranger himself, Chuck Norris. Nothing great, but still a fun time at the movies. And just when you thought Hollywood couldn't release any more syrupy schmaltz fests like Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, in comes Disney's The Odd Life of Timothy Green. From the moment I saw the trailer, I knew this was going to be some really dopey stuff. I liked a few things here and there about this movie, but as a whole, it just didn't gel well enough for me to recommend, so I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 10. But I'd watch it again repeatedly if that means I don't have to sit through another viewing of Hit and Run. Here you get to see Dax Shepard drive around in a badass-looking automobile and do donuts almost repeatedly throughout the movie. It's like the equivalent of watching a Dukes of Hazzard episode, except it's a lot dumber. It's slow, at times surprisingly mean-spirited, and completely devoid of humor. It's just an all-around piss-poor movie. It's a good thing our next movie, Premium Rush, is a much faster and energetically paced film. Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays a New York bicycle messenger who receives a mysterious envelope that propels him into a whole mess of trouble when a corrupt cop, played by Michael Shannon, chases him around the city to retrieve it. What's cool about this film is that it knows what it wants to be and just goes with it, whether you like it or not, and I liked it quite a bit. And finally, the last movie I saw this summer was Lawless, formerly titled as The Wettest County in the World. Make your own joke. From the same director of such dark and grisly films like The Road and The Proposition, you would expect the same type of tragic hopelessness to meander in John Hillcoat's latest film set during the Prohibition era, but surprisingly, it's not as dark as you might think it is. True, there are some moments where violence erupts in the goriest of ways, but it plays out like a good old-fashioned crowd pleaser. And you know what? I was entirely okay with it. It has a good story, great cinematography, and terrific performances by all the actors involved. It may not be a masterpiece, but it sure is one incredibly entertaining flick to end the summer movie season. So that was my 2012 summer movie recap. Stay tuned for more Midnight Movie Madness reviews in the near future, but until then, I'm the host. Thanks for watching.